Planning your day.
Even more coming. That's good.
I'm just dead. I'm feeling things to I gotta get started.
Big dinner. Do this. Well, when I was on the board before, we were upstairs in the little room, so this is like,
Yeah.
fancy.
When I first started, yeah, with the alternate kind of serving.
Yeah, I remember I came to
Yeah.
one, you were there.
This is the nicer.
Good evening. It's November 6, 2017 at 6:30, and I call to order the Heritage Preservation Board. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bolton,
Here.
Ms. Protomitis,
Here.
Ms. Page,
Here.
Ms. Johnson, Mrs. Terrapini,
Here.
Miss Bean. She's not here.
Thank you. At this time, we'll hear public comments regarding any item that is not on the agenda for this evening. If you have a public comment and you'd like to speak, please come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name's Carrie Root. I live at 203 South Spring Boulevard in Tarpon Springs, Florida, 34689. My comment is that I noticed that the renovations happening at the former Scholl's house, which I believe is 123 South Spring Boulevard. They stripped the siding off on the lower level below the front porch, and they have they've replaced it with wood siding. However, where it was vertically oriented before with the slats, they're now horizontal. I didn't get any notice of that update being made, and I wanted to bring that to the board's notice. Did I miss a notice, or is this an unapproved change?
We haven't had an application. We'll check into it.
So it's not my action, it's yours, Karen. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm done. Thank you very much, board.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
While she's coming up, Ms. Bean, I think, is an alternate. Shouldn't she join us at the dais, even though she's not voting? Because we have
We have an
one opening
so-
tonight anyway, but
Yeah. Thank you for that point of order.
so because we do our short one regular member, unless Ms. Johnson shows up, then Ms. Bean would be a voting member this evening, correct?
Correct. That's correct. Correct. Yes. Attorney. At this time, we're going to look at the, I didn't see you go up. I'm sorry.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I'm Nancy. I'm Nancy Dively. I live at 215 Pineapple Street, Tarpon Springs. And after her comment, I just wanted to say something. And it appears in our neighborhood, after we become a historic district, that many people have followed the rules. Myself, my neighbor Carrie Walsh, our neighbors, filed the right permits, and gone through a lot of hoops to have things done to our home. But we're also seeing that a lot of people are getting away with not doing it. And there's been building department issues where they issued permits when they shouldn't have. And I just think it's something you guys need to be aware of, because why have a preservation board, and why are we in a historic district if part of the people follow the rules and somebody else comes in, puts in cheap windows, doesn't pull permits, and does things that don't really meet the standards of this particular neighborhood as being a historic district and the rules and regulations that go with it. Thank you.
Staff have any response?
I would just say that if there's any particular address that you are aware of that any work is being done, to just please call us and let us know. There are renovations that can be made with staff approval, depending if it's a contributing or non-contributing structure, and depending on what they're doing. There are things that can be reviewed by staff and approved that way. So if you see something at a home that you feel hasn't been permitted or you question, just call us and we'll be happy to look into it for you. Mhm.
Sure. We're a generous board.
Carrie Root again, do I need to repeat my address?
No.
All right. When I was on the board, I had taken pictures when I was up in Fernandina Beach. They have a historic area up there, and they had really lovely signs where at the top of the street sign it had local historic district or national historic district, and I, at that point, put it to the city staff that it would be fabulous if we could have signage like that in our historic districts, because so many times people will move in or they might even be residents there and just not know that their homes are in a historic area. And that would raise significant awareness, and plus it builds an esprit de corps for a neighborhood to have that sort of designation. And at that point, I was told that the city had purchased their own sign making machines and that they would absolutely be able to do that. But I've seen signs now go up in replacement and there's absolutely nothing there. So I'd ask that the board and the staff consider making that, because I think it would be a very positive impact to the historic areas of Tarpon Springs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak to that?
Sure.
I think it's a great idea. I've seen it in other places. Maybe you could send a photo to the staff so that Karen has it. But Karen, could you look into that and see if that's true, that does the city have the capability to do it? And do we just need to design it and put it
Yeah,
up? Or how does that work?
They can do just the regular street signs, nothing fancy. So if we want to do something that has a historic look to it, any ideas, bring them to us, because the city right now, we started looking at some of our signage. Long story short, the blue wayfinding signs that were done in 2011, they're fading and they're hard to read at that light blue and the white. So we started looking at perhaps replacing those, and then that got into a bigger discussion about a lot of other signs that are in the city that are not looking so good, whether they're street signs, whether they're neighborhood signs, whether like the Union Academy sign is cracked. And so there's staff right now they're doing a survey of all of the signage in the city and coming back with a program to replace a lot of the signs. We've talked about doing some historic signs on the sponge, not historic, but replacing street signs on the sponge docks with white poles that would have the name in Greek and English. That would make that a little bit more culturally. So we could look at doing some things in the downtown too. But if you have samples of anything that you'd like to see, just send it over and we'll look at it.
Any other public comments? Okay, let's move on to the approval of minutes. You do not have to have been here in order to make a motion to approve or second or vote on the minutes.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the regular session, October 2nd, 2017.
I second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Bean,
Yes.
Mrs. Terrapini,
Yes.
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Protomitis,
Yes.
Mr. Bolton.
Yes. We're moving on to our quasi-judicial announcement.
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Heritage Preservation Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at the hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the board wishing to disclose any ex parte communication or conflicts of interest tonight? Okay. Anyone wishing to give any testimony tonight, applicant or staff, if they could please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So sworn.
Okay, moving on to application 17-99, Bay Street.
This application is for 301 Bay Street, which is a contributing structure. The residents are looking, they've done some renovations over the past several years that have received approval by the Heritage Preservation Board, primarily replacing windows in 2014 and then the remaining of all of their windows in 2016. And we've given you the certificates of approval for those windows. And now they're looking to construct a detached garage in the rear of their property. It is served by an alley. They're looking to do a 2-story. The second floor they like to use as an office, some office space and storage. They're replicating the garage to look like the main structure itself, so the same kind of stucco, the same windows that had been previously approved, the hip roof with the same pitch, shingles and window styles, and they're trying to match the paint as well. The footprint of the building is 336 square feet, and then the total under roof would be 672. So within the staff report, we've got the criteria that you look at, along with the staff analysis. I'll just go through the relevant ones. Number 1 looks at the height and width of the structures and how it looks with the neighborhood. This is a new garage, so this new construction, it would not be a contributing structure. Its footprint of the 336 square feet has a height of 18 feet. It meets the land development code for that zoning district, which is R60. We went and looked at the adjacent structures in that neighborhood. The primary structures are a combination of single and 2-story homes. And then the garages, we looked in that same alley, I got some pictures in there for you. There's another 2-story garage and another, it looks like a 1.5-story garage in that same alley. Number 2 looks at height and width of doors and entryways. Again, the windows in the garage are going to match the existing windows of their primary structure. They're having a standard garage door, and the entry doors are a white steel. If you look at within the packet, they gave you a rendering of the new garage. Just want to point out that those windows are not the windows. They couldn't get the designer to do the windows. The windows are going to be what they have in their home. Number 3 looks at the relationship of the structure to the open space. Staff analysis is it's not going to adversely affect any existing open space. The garage is placed in the rear of the yard, which meets the design guidelines. They want structures like that located in the rear yard or the side yard closest to the rear. And the placement also meets the side yard setbacks and the rear setbacks, which are both 5 feet minimum. And they provided a survey and a site plan showing those setbacks. The shape and texture of the roof is consistent with similar garages in the area. It's also, again, it's going to replicate the roof of the primary structures with shingles with a 12.3 pitch. There's a new building code, it'll be 12.3.5. Number 5 looks at the size and mass, shape of the building. Again, by code, an accessory structure, what this is considered, must be subordinate in area to the primary structure. The existing home is 1,325 square feet. The proposed garage is 336 square foot footprint, which is what planning and zoning looks at, and a total of 672 under roof. Landscaping was not a portion of this. Number 7 doesn't apply, it's new construction. Number 8 talks about not replicating a previous appearance, and the garage is not attempting to replicate anything earlier than what it is, but it is being designed to replicate the home itself. And number 9 is new construction. Number 10 talks about conforming to other requirements of the code. The placement of the garage meets the land development code. The footprint is subordinate to the home. Planning and zoning did a analysis of the size of the backyard relative to the overall structure, and that meets the size that it can be. Actually, it could be larger. It's got the setbacks that are required for the code. So it meets all the requirements as determined by the Planning and Zoning Director of the Land Development Code. And there are no impacts on archaeological sites. So the recommendation from staff is to approve the request with the condition that a building permit is required and the applicant's required to obtain the proper permitting. The public notification, at the time that this was written, we had not received any. However, there has been 2 correspondence from neighbors. One was a neighbor at 305 Bay, which pointed out some objections that neighbor had to the garage and some comments. And there was also an email that's in your packet that was supporting from an additional neighbor. And with that, you've got the survey and all the information in your packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So just to clarify the process, because not everybody has been before the board or knows exactly where everybody will get a chance to speak or ask questions. So we're going to follow what's in our proceedings of our bylaws for how this will move forward with questions and the applicant speaking and public comments. So the way it states in our guidelines is that the presentation will be made by staff, subject to questions from the board. So we will right now see if any board members have any questions of just the staff, not the applicant, but just the staff. And I'll start with Ms. Terrapini.
Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lemons, when I'm looking at the survey, it looks like there's a gray area. I think it's titled metal shed that backs onto the alley. So that's going to remain? And then,
The shed is being torn down.
okay,
Yeah.
and which side, north or south side of the property is the new garage going to go in?
It'll be on the side where that shed was.
Okay, so it'll kind of replace the shed as far as the location
Correct.
is, okay. And I noticed when I drove out there today that there's a fence along the alley side. I'm assuming they're gonna take the fence down so that they can access the garage from the alley? Because there's no driveway off of Bay.
Yeah, I believe they're keeping they can talk to that, but I believe they're keeping the fence, but they're putting in an opening that can be opened.
Right, so they will they'll access the garage via the alley.
Correct.
Okay, because there's no driveways from Bay Street.
There's no driveways, right.
All right, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I have a couple questions. On that alley, do we know how many accessory structures there are behind homes?
I did a windshield drive-by. I have one, two, the
I
two
counted
photographs.
9, possibly 10. Is that accurate?
There were quite a few. I just took pictures of the nearby adjacent ones.
And of how many of those structures behind homes are there that are 2-story?
I found 2
Was
that on this alley.
was one 2-story and the other one like 1.5?
Well, it had, I considered it 1.5 because it had a stairway going to the second floor.
Okay.
So but it looked a little bit smaller than this other one, which almost looks like another house.
Mr. Chairman, when I drove it, and admittedly it was starting to get dark tonight, but I'm pretty sure that on the block of Bay Street that this property is on, so it would be the west side of the alley, so all the houses that front on Bay, the same block as this property, I didn't see any 2-story garages or accessory structures. There was one 2-story house, not the house immediately adjacent to this site, but one house down, so 2 houses. So on that entire block, there was one 2-story house, and I didn't see any 2-story garages. I think these pictures that were on our desk, I'm pretty sure this one on the south definitely was on the east side of the alley, so it faced that Pineapple, the next street east. The full house faced Pineapple.
The one on the bottom there
This.
is 2 homes south of the subject property across the alley.
Across
Right,
the alley.
but it's
right.
not on the same Bay Street.
Right, it's on,
No, it's
Yeah.
not.
I just drove the alley to share the alley, because when people are looking
And I
at
just
it-
want to know if my numbers were right. I counted 9, you could count another shed that I saw as 10, and I saw one that was an actual 2-story with finished square footage on the top. So 1 out of 10 was the number. I just want to make sure I was accurate on that. Looking at the land development code, and it's referenced R60, and I'm not sure, I just want to make sure I'm reading it correct, because that's what we're using. So in R60, it looked like there was a limit to a 200 square foot garage on an accessory supplemental structure. It stated a storage structure, and this is in 36.01, storage structure, shelters, bathhouse, and detached garages. Storage structures, outdoor shelters, sheds, bathhouses, and similar structures shall not exceed 200 square feet in a residential district. Is that a correct guideline that we should be looking at, or where are you getting the higher? I just couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's 3601, storage structures, shelters, bathhouses, and detached garages.
Mm-hmm.
Detached garages may be constructed in a required rear yard provided does not exceed 20 feet in height, no closer than 5 feet, no closer to the side property line. The maximum size of the detached garage shall not exceed 25% of the required rear yard. So what they've got in here is the way planning and zoning calculates it, it calculates the size of the yard itself. It takes 25% of that for what the size it can be. So it depends on the size of the lot and the size of this primary structure.
So,
And it was, I had the planning and zoning director compute that for me.
so in 3601, paragraph A, which comes before the paragraph you're discussing, it says they shall not exceed 200 square feet in a residential district.
That says a storage structure, outdoor shelter, shed, bathhouse, and B is the detached garage, which is
Okay,
what this
thank
is
you.
considered.
That's what I
right.
needed clarification on. Thank you. And it's not 7.5 feet as a setback?
It's 5 feet from the rear.
Where is that at in the LCD? Or the Land Development Code, LDC?
It's 5 rear, 5 side, and 20 front. Those are
What
the
section
setbacks.
is that in?
Section 2503. Minimum yards. You might be looking at side street, so if you're on a street, this is an interior property.
Sorry, let me get there. 2503 in what paragraph? What section?
Under number 4, E4.
E4. Minimum yards?
Minimum yards.
Side interior 5 feet. Thank you. It's listed several different ways in several
I
different
know.
places, so I appreciate you helping us get educated on that. The other question I have is looking at it being a subordinate structure. In the code, it says mass and area. And I noticed in the analysis, it says subordinate and area, but you don't mention mass.
Mhm.
So are we not to take into consideration the mass of that building being 2-story in relation to a 1-story structure in front of it?
Well, you can look at that, and whether you look at the size and the mass, it's both subordinate to the main structure. Mass can also be considered for the height of the structure, which is 18 feet. It's allowed to be 20. So if you look at either of those, it complies with the requirements.
Do we know what the height of the main structure is on the property?
I don't, but the applicant probably
Okay.
might know that.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you for answering all of those. Any other questions from the board? So then, at this point, we will have a presentation made by the applicant or their representative, and then they'll receive questions from the board.
Gary Prado, 301 Bay Street, Tarpon Springs, Florida, 34689. As part of the presentation or the proceedings tonight, I have a rebuttal letter to the one complainant, and I also have 3 letters from homeowners, 2 directly behind me on the alley from Pineapple and Lemon, and I also have a letter from the owners right next to me on 201 Bay Street that I'd like to give to everyone as part of the package. Can I do that?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
And the letter will answer a lot of questions that have already come up. I guess just to answer a few of the questions that have already been presented.
Can
Oh.
we have just a minute
Oh, sure.
to read this, just
Yeah.
so we can? If there's no objections, we'll continue.
Okay, as the letter notes, the area that the calculation for that backyard calculation that the city did showed that I could do 425 square foot garage based on this backyard calculation. And I pulled it way back to 336. And I'm using the exact same finishes. I'm trying to replicate the house as exactly as I possibly can. And in thinking about the 2-story versus 1-story, the engineer that did my drawings for me pointed out that I have a pretty good sized crawl space in my house, which is almost 3.5 feet, 8 foot of ceiling, and then with the pitch roof, I have 4 feet 8 inches above, so I'm at 16 feet 2. So my 1-story is 16 feet 2, and the 2-story is going to be 18.6, which is 2.5 feet. So I'm asking that the HPB approve it.
Thank you. This time, the board will ask any questions.
Mr. Prado, the letter that you passed out tonight from James and Diana Nicholas, they're at 201, so they're the site immediately to the north of you
Yes,
at Bay and Lemon on the
Yes.
larger lot? Okay.
and they're actually here if you want to ask them any questions.
Okay. And then Mr. Chamberlain in this letter at 216 Pineapple, so he's kind of he's directly east of you, but he fronts on Pineapple.
Correct.
Okay. And this last one, 409 West Lemon, where is,
That's, if you come out my driveway, it's catty corner.
it's
and-
Lemon in the alley?
Yes.
Okay. So the only one that's adjacent to you of the letters that you gave us tonight is the 201 Lemon to your north.
Yeah, the other two are behind on the alley, share the
Okay.
alley, yes.
I just want to make sure I had where they
Yep.
were. Thank you.
You may have a seat. Thank you.
Okay.
You might want to stay close in case you will have an opportunity to rebut. At this time, we'll hear any members of the public that would like to speak in support of this application. If you'll come forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record. And were you here when they swore in? Then when you come to the podium, we'll swear you in.
You can just raise your right hand. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so sworn.
Okay, my name is Diana Nicholas, and I live on 201 Bay Street, Tarpon Springs, Florida 34689. We are the next door neighbor. There is a lot, and then there is, it's like a vacant lot with a garage and then ourselves. So we are basically their next door neighbor. And yes, we are in support that they would have a garage. We understand the dilemma of not having a garage, as we ourselves do not have a garage also on our property. You will be seeing us next month for the same request. But in favor for the Prados, I was told we had purchased our house back in March, and I fell in love with our house. But one of the criteria was this. I told the listing agent, I said, listen, we love this Craftsman home. We want to make an offer, but there's one stipulation. I need to know, my husband and I need to know, we can build a garage on this property. Otherwise, we would never purchase this house. Because in today's living, people have cars, and you need to have a garage. Even for resale value, it would be, it's a hard sale not to have a garage. Well, the listing agent told me, she says, of course you can have a garage. She goes, you have Pineapple Street, you have Bay Street, we have an alley street. There's an alley street, which this street is designed because it's a historic neighborhood. The streets were cut very narrow. Our house is 1917. It was the days of horse and buggy, and they said that they cannot bulldoze all the houses and widen the roads. So in order to rectify this problem, you have an access road or an alley road to be able to now live in today's standards of having a garage, attached or detached. So that was how we proceeded and purchased our own house. With the Prados, God bless them. It's very hard for them not having a garage. Bay Street, as you know, it's cut very narrow, but you can only park on the opposite side of where we live, on the even side of Bay Street. That's where people can parallel park. First of all, their property cannot have a driveway or garage in the front, the Bay Street side. You cannot. Their property just does not allow for that. So they're relegated to park on the alley parallel. Now, of course, the alley is perfect if you want to access your home with your respective garage, but it's too narrow really to park parallel. What happens is we have a waste management comes through. We have our neighbors who have their garages, they're, leaving or coming, they're going through that road. And they really do run the risk of having their cars sideswiped. It's just they have no choice. They really have nowhere else to park. With Bay Street, an example, if they were to go grocery shopping.
We normally give it 2 minutes, so I'm going to ask you just to wrap it up. We we know where you're headed. So
yeah, the bottom line is they need a garage. They have nowhere to park.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak in support of this applicant?
I just love a microphone. I'm Carrie Root. Do I need to give you my address again? No. Okay. When you started this, Karen, you described this home as a contributing structure. There are few of those these days, and the numbers are declining. I've known the Prados almost since they moved to Tarpon Springs. I have seen them take this home and make many, many loving changes to it, as they had purchased it as a second home, and they fell in love with Tarpon Springs and the neighborhood and the area. And they actually have now sold from Orlando, moved down. They're permanent residents of Tarpon Springs. But the point is all of the changes they've made to that home have continued to keep it as a contributing structure. It has the exact same character. It's what we want to see. Now, they have specific needs, and there's a number of ways they could have looked to have changed that home. And from what I have seen, it's pretty easy for someone who wants to take a contributing structure and change it to something different. There's ways to do it. I mean, I've sat on the board and I've seen it happen time and again. But they're not doing that. They're keeping the integrity of the home. They're keeping the integrity of the way it looks from the street. But they have needs for that structure. So I implore on the board to please approve it. It's a good plan. They are good people. They're doing the right thing for this neighborhood. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public wishing to speak in support? Would the applicant like to have a rebuttal from any of the people that spoke in favor? Yeah. We will move on to anybody from the public who would like to speak in opposition to this application. Please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Carrie Walsh. I live at 225 Pineapple Street in Tarpon. I live across the street from where the houses that share that alley are, and I could tell you of all the garages that are back there, there's only one that's two-story because I walk my dog down there all the time. I agree with what this woman just said about the incredible restoration that they've done to the house. It's just, they've taken really a good care of keeping everything. The only problem I have is that I just don't think it needs to be two-story. When I sit on my front porch, which is not a good enough reason for you to change your mind, but when I sit on my front porch, I could see that property there, and I think a two-story would then probably bring it over 216 Pineapple, which is one of the letters that were written from the gentleman who just bought it. So that's the only issue I have, is that it being two-story. The only other two-story close by is the old Brown House at 201 Bay. So I'm not really totally against the garage, but I'm against it being two stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public that would like to speak in opposition? Would the applicant like a rebuttal to the public comment?
Yes, as I pointed out earlier, the peak of my roof is 16 feet 2, and this is going to be 18.6. So in relationship, it's going to be 2 feet 4 inches higher. And in relation, that's not putting a one-story next to a two-story. By the absolute definition, that's true, but the peak of my roof is 16.2 versus 18.6 and 7/16 for this. And I don't think that the mass is overwhelming in any way. I need that second floor so that I can stop renting an office and storage space and save $475 a month.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, while he's there, could I ask him a question?
Sure.
Could you help me understand the height and how you're measuring it? On your existing house, are you measuring to the top of the peak?
Yes.
To the top, the highest point of the roof structure is 16 and a half.
16.2.
16 feet 2 inches. Okay. Now on the garage, are you measuring to the very top of that peak as well?
Yeah, there's a drawing that my engineer did in there that showed that the peak is 18 and 6 7/16 high. So the peak is below the midpoint. The 20-foot requirement is the midpoint. So the midpoint of the roof can't be 20 feet. My peak is below the 20 feet.
When you're saying peak, what I mean by peak is the very
highest-
top, the highest point of the roof, of the pitched roof.
The highest point of the roof is 18 feet, 6 7/16 inches.
Honestly, it doesn't look like that. In comparison, it looks out of scale, so that's why I'm asking the question, because it doesn't look that way.
Yeah, we have, my ground floor is 3 feet, 5 inches above the ground. And then we've got 8-foot 1-inch ceilings, and then we've got 4 feet, 8 inches in the attic, and that comes out to 16.2.
Thank you.
Okay.
Would the staff like to have a rebuttal?
No.
Thank you. So at this point, we will close public comments. Thank you. And we will move to discussion from the board. We'll hear a motion if there is one, and then there'll be discussion and then a vote.
Prior motion first before discussion? I don't know how can you make a motion if you have a discussion?
I know, that's what it says in here. I can, as the chair, I can change that. Let's have discussion, and then I'll have a motion.
Well, I think there's a lot of good things about the application. I like that they're using the same material as the house. I like that using the same pitch of the roof as the house. I like that it's in the back of the property as an accessory structure ought to be. I think they're very lucky that they have an alley to be able to, use the alley to access it. I appreciate the difference in the heights, but honestly, I have a concern about a two-story building when in the entire, as an accessory structure for a couple of reasons. One, the entire block of Bay, both sides of the street, there's only one two-story house, much less a two-story accessory building. But I also understand that everybody, we live in the modern world and most people want to have a garage. So I would like to find a way for him to have a garage. I don't have a problem with the garage. I just have a problem with it being a two-story garage. So if there's a way for him to make it a one-story garage or half garage and half office, whatever works. I just am concerned about a two-story garage. It doesn't seem to me to meet the same heights as those immediately surrounding the property, which is condition number 5, and then condition number 1, the height be compatible with adjacent contributing structures. So that's my concern.
Any other board comment? I would echo Ms. Terapany's comments that both properties on either side have one-story garages. On the entire alleyway, there's 1 out of 9, I could say 10, so really 90% of the garages are one-story. And I don't think that the height of 2 feet or 2 stories is consistent with the mass of height with the main property structure on the property. So I don't think it doesn't seem like any of the board members are against anybody having a garage. So far, Ms. Terapany and I have been the only two that speak. So, is there any other comments from the board that would agree, disagree, or have any comments relating to that?
I'll just comment that if this is the use of this structure, it has dual uses. It's for storage and for an office. And given that, I live in a flood zone, I have a detached garage, and I know what it's like to have your garage flood and move things, and it would make sense because of the flooding situation and the flooding possibilities and risks, to not have to move an office every time that we have a king tide or something of that nature. So if, as Mr. Prado has presented, it is a 2 foot and change difference in between the home and garage, I honestly, it would make sense to elevate it, have 2 stories just for protection wise that way.
And I would agree with that in terms of we're not talking about the full 2-story difference relative to a 1-story, but we're talking about 2.5 feet roughly. So
I would
that's
agree
my
with that as
feeling.
well. Yeah.
Well, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of a garage at 1 story if the applicant wishes to amend his application, or if not, well, that's my motion, that if I would approve a garage at a 1-story height.
Do we have a second? Motion fails for not having a second. Do we have another motion? The chair will entertain another motion.
I move to approve the application as presented at 301 Bay Street to construct a detached 2-story garage in the rear yard.
Is this as presented in the staff report?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I second.
And then we'll have roll call.
Ms. Bean,
Yes.
Mrs. Terrapini,
No.
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Protomitis,
Yes.
Mr. Bolton.
Yes. Thank you. All right, let's, moving forward to discussion item Craig Park shade structure. This is for a shade structure in Craig Park and was on our agenda at the last meeting and failed to be approved. So it's been brought to us by staff for discussion.
Right. As we talked about it last time, there were several concerns. I think primarily that it looked too modern, and you asked us to go back and see if we could do something that would look a little bit more in place with Craig Park, and especially with the band shell, to kind of mimic those curves of the band shell. So staff went back and came up with this drawing here. It's got the curve on the archway. It's a 20 by 30 foot structure. It would be 11 feet at center. And they're proposing to have the front poles a little bit higher at 9 feet and the back poles a little shorter, so it would kind of be slanted up a little bit, giving you you'd have clear vision of anything that's up on the band shell.
Better acoustics as well.
Yeah, better acoustics, yes. And then took an aerial of where it would be, so it wouldn't be on the complete entire concrete area, but it would be generally where it's found on the map. We really are trying to, over the years, there's the events that take place at Craig Park, 4th of July, it's very, very hot. We're trying to get some kind of shade there. And so we're trying to find something that would be approving to the Heritage Preservation Board. If you have any ideas or comments, if this is closer, anything you'd like, the city manager would really like to get something in place, like by 4th of July of next year. Just want to see that area utilized a lot more. So we're bringing this to you for your consideration. We talked about it being all green, so it would, match in as much as it could with the surrounding trees. And we thought that the curvature would match the band shell curvature. I think it's a little bit closer anyway, hopefully, to what you were looking for at the last meeting.
Karen, is this a screen, like a shade screen, or is it solid?
It's solid.
And then green.
Solid.
And what's the material?
It's
Metal?
Um, yeah, it's a galvalume coated steel.
And we did say this would be something that would be removed in cooler months, or,
Well, that was the previous one. We
Okay.
could take it down.
so this is
Um,
permanent?
We could have this one, the way it was described to me, if you wanted to have these removed, they could remove the poles if that's something you want. But it's not being utilized on the whole concrete, so, if you'd like it to be removable, I can take that back to them.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
I'm sorry that I missed the meeting, when y'all discussed this. I don't know if it was last month or the month before when I wasn't on the board, but, I guess I'm kind of struggling with, there's a lot of shade in Craig Park generally by the trees, and I think more shade, if the goal is to get more shade right in front of the band shell so that people who are at the band shell activity specifically, then, we could pay, you could buy a little bigger trees and put those along the side, because obviously some of the trees that used to be there, I think have come down. I don't think the style of this, I don't think the material of this is at all conducive or connected to the park in any way, shape, or form. And I think it would be a huge disruption to the park. If every now and then someone wanted to put up a tent, like we all go to events where there's tents, that someone puts up temporarily for a wedding or something like that, I understand that, but to have this there forever, when I think if shade's our goal, there's a couple solutions. One, planting new trees. And now that doesn't solve the problem tomorrow, but you can buy, fast-growing trees, number one, and bigger sized trees. Number two, put the activity that needs the shade somewhere besides right in, there's other activities in Craig Park that use the shade that's there. So again, it's kind of a key part of our historic district, and I think putting in something that doesn't match at all and isn't in any way, shape, or form related to the historic nature of the buildings there would be a big mistake. Like I said, if there's a need for certain events like July 4th, I mean, certainly we all get that July 4th is really hot, and maybe that's an event where you just, the city uses a temporary tent for that weekend or that event. But I know that when I go to the art show in April, sometimes it's warm, sometimes it's not so warm, but some people are sitting in the shade listening to the music, and some people are sitting in the sun in front of the band shell. So I'm not sure that there's really a problem here that needs to be solved by building a structure that doesn't fit in with the historic nature of the park.
I would just say that when we talked about it last month, we talked about a structure that could be removed,
Mhm.
and also about a structure that was maybe aesthetically close to the surrounding areas. Don't think this quite hits the mark. But I do like the idea of being able to have some shade there when someone is, sitting there listening to the music. I like the idea that you had it a little taller in the front, a little shorter in the back, trying to make sure people could see and their view wasn't impeded by the roof line. I still like the idea, especially if it's removable. But I don't think this fits.
I have a couple questions. This is better than what we saw before. Before it looked like a pagoda, which
Yeah,
is
not the other one.
more Japanese than it just didn't. I to think about what I thought that looked like because I couldn't think of the right word in that meeting. And I've been to places that have historic buildings that have a band shell, and then they've done some sort of shade structure. I don't think the idea of it being removable is really feasible for city staff and storage when it gets taken off and where you're going to put it, and we struggle with storage now in the city. So as far as it coming off or on, personally, I don't think that's in our guidelines as to whether it can go on or off or something we have to consider. What I am looking at is just the structure itself. It says the accessory structure should follow the curve or follow the, the lines or the building that it's being, the property is being placed on. And this comes closer, but it looks to me like the band shell is arched this way, but then this one would be arched this way. Is that correct? You wouldn't be necessarily following that arch out.
If you placed it, yeah, because the bandshell arch is this way, so if you placed it the long way, it would follow that
Then
arch.
it would follow. Is that what they were? Because it didn't. I couldn't tell if
Yeah.
that's what they were looking at.
Yeah, I
doing
mean,
here.
they would want to place it instead of this way, the other way, so it would follow the arch.
And the was there any discussion? Is there a committee doing this? It's a staff group or a committee, or who's driving this?
Our project administration department has been looking at it. They're the group that's tasked with lots of projects like this that don't fall under any one area. So they've been looking at different types of structures, and from their last discussion, the first one kind of looked like where the fitness park is. It was kind of modeled after that. It was canvas shape. This one is more permanent, but we took into consideration some of the designs that you had sent over, and then the discussion of the group of having it a little bit more arching and look a little bit nicer.
What's the, just a question for the city, what's the cost of a structure like this?
I didn't ask how much this is costing. I know that they don't have an unlimited budget, so I don't have the answer for you for that.
It's, I mean, commercial structures like this aren't cheap. So
No.
was there any discussion, or are they planning to have a sound audit or somebody weigh in on the structure that they should get that is a sound engineer? That if we're talking about putting a shade structure in front of a band shell because we want to enhance the experience for those in the park, I still highly, we do things sometimes in the city because they're a good idea, but we really, then afterwards we go, why didn't we think about that? I think this is one of those cases that it would be important to have that done because it's makes people that are performers want to come because we have a nice venue for them, and our structure makes them sound their best, and it enhances the experience for the for those that attend. So I would hate to see them spend thousands and thousands of dollars on this and not have a sound study and get a recommendation.
Well, and actually, the person who is working on this is in a band and plays that. He played at the band shell, and he plays, so he understood that. We talked about making sure it was going to be, it wouldn't damage the acoustic.
So you're just looking for ideas and stuff to take back to
Yeah,
them?
because we really want to, have some type of shade there because, a lot of times you go to the events and there's nobody in that middle area. And, in the last meeting, I had some pictures of where it looked. I don't know that the trees could ever shade that, that middle area where people would like to be and would like to sit. So we really would like to get something. So we wanted to get your approval or your ideas, your thoughts before, moving it any further.
Can I ask about the placement of the structure? It just seems so far back, off to one side a little bit. Or maybe that's just the optics there, but
It's completely out of scale with everything there. I think the thing I'm struggling with, maybe I'm picking up from some of the other commissioners too, I don't think this is going to be a solution where the city can just go to a book of available shade structures from manufacturers, which may work in the non-historic part of town or in parks, but it's not going to work here, in my opinion. You're going to have to find a preservation architect to design something that's really going to work. And I think David's point about reflecting making sure that acoustically it works, because that's what happens at that event a lot of times, even if it's speakers or music or whatever. So I really think you guys are going to have to look for a preservation architect to do a custom solution, not just as we would expect someone doing a new addition to a historic house. We don't expect them just to go to Home Depot and find the solution. So I think I understand the city's trying to get it there for a big event. So maybe there's a temporary solution on a temporary tent until a real structure can be designed that everybody will be happy with. This board, the city staff, and everybody who goes to it, because it's going to be there for a long, long time. I mean, these structures have been enjoyed in Craig Park for decades, so we want to make sure it continues to be enjoyed for decades. So that's what I would suggest, is that a little broader approach be looked at with finding a preservation architect to do a design that keys off of, the design of the band shell and the rest of the buildings in the park, obviously, and then, deals with the other issues that the other board members have suggested.
I think there's a reason, even the Romans had it right, that there's a reason that amphitheaters and acoustical venues are in the round. And the reason the Tampa Amphitheater, if you look at the shade structure around it, the way it's designed in the round, that's probably going to be your sound engineer is going to recommend that. I'm all for a structure. I don't mind seeing a structure there. But this has the opportunity to be something that's painted, photographed, becomes part of the sight lines of that park from the road, and I think it's really important to get it right. So when you're in a boat in the bayou and looking across that park, or you're driving by, or it's being photographed at the centerpiece of Tarpon Springs, that we really make sure that we get it right.
Something
I'm
else
sorry, go
to
ahead.
consider. I don't know if this could be considered or not, but how about making it a green type of shelter, maybe with the trellis, and then like you said, Ms. Terrapana said about fast growing trees. Well, surely there's, I don't know, I'm going to use the example of Confederate jasmine, but there are many vines that we could make it more like an arboretum, and something that would not be removable, but it would be pleasant to the eye. It would be acoustically appealing, and I don't know. There
And
might be
unique.
possibilities in
Something
that
different
regard
that sets
if
Well,
they're
it
even
connects to
looking at
the
that.
use of the property as a park, too.
Right.
I mean, it gets back to that.
I think that's very creative and a very appropriate thought, and I think this is an opportunity. And I would like to see, it's an investment in time and certainly a lot of money. And you brought up the cost, which we don't know how much it's going to cost, but we would assume that if we're going to do it halfway well, it's going to cost a lot of money. So I think we do need to approach the opportunity with a lot of thought and not just put a Band-Aid on an issue that is a real issue, is valid issue, but I don't think we're there yet. But definitely, I think tonight's comments were very valuable and hopefully will be valuable to
Do you have anything in your mind that you're thinking of that you think it should look like?
well, I think Ms. Page identified kind of a natural, which ties into also what Mrs. Terrapini said about the shade trees, but tying it into maybe creating a structure, but having more of a green or a natural feel. I think that would,
Like
be a
the
perfect
canopy
solution.
would be a trellis, and you could plant some things on there that would create the shade.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think it definitely is going to have to be like I'm not an artist. So if that's the current line of the roof, and then in front, you're going to have to kind of, whatever it is, it's going to have to kind of hug it with a taller in the front, shorter in the back, to create that acoustic feel. And if you did that with, those vines and things that grow, I think it could really be a special, something really special that
Creative.
the city, people would be like, wow, that's like a really pleasant place to be. And as far as it being done by July of 2018, how long has that band shell been there and we've made it? If it doesn't get done by July of this year, it's not a problem. We've survived, and the great residents of Tarpon Springs would rather us get it right than rush it.
And just one more point too, I think we need to move away from the steel. I mean, there's no steel in any of those buildings, so they're concrete block. So maybe the columns need to be concrete block. If it's a mesh underneath that, I'm not really sure what the material would be that the vines would grow on, but that's, I don't have a problem with that, but we need to get, the materials need to be the same as the materials of those buildings that are there. So, and I imagine that if you had a good preservation architect to go and look at those buildings, I imagine there's a motif that they could pick up from the buildings that they could use in designing the columns that would make the connection between the band shell and the tourist club. I can't think of it right now, but I'm sure there's something out there that a good creative architect could think of, and then pick up Ms. Page's idea about making it a more green, have some green aspect to it.
That archway in the band shell is keystones,
Yeah.
and then there's several other archways, I think, that actually also have those keystones that, come in, and that would be a great thing to pick up on.
Okay.
So, staff comments?
I have the schedule for the coming year for you. That's all the HPV meetings. And I just wanted to ask if you have any preference for the January meeting. I know in years past, this board has sometimes wanted to change its January meeting because it would fall around Epiphany and the Epiphany weekend. So if you wanted to keep it on the 8th, that's fine. Or if you wanted to move it, we could move it to the 15th.
Our normal meeting date would be which, the 8th?
The 8th,
That's the Monday after Epiphany.
the Monday after Epiphany.
It's before, when it's right before it, that day before it, that it was difficult. I don't have a need to have it changed if anybody else wants to make a motion to leave it.
Right.
All the other dates I see look like they're adjusted for holidays.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any other staff comments?
No, I know we introduced you to Michelle Wagner at the last meeting. So we're starting a transition with her. She'll eventually be the staff liaison to this board. So you'll see her at the next meeting. She's going to be doing a couple of the cases. I think we have 2 so far.
Mm-hmm.
And then starting to work on the design guidelines.
At this time, do we have any applications for December?
We do.
Okay, good.
We have 2.
We'll meet in December. And any board comments?
Yes. I would like to comment on the public comment that was made regarding signage and go back to what Mr. Bolton has been bringing up about new residents coming into the historic district and not being informed by their realtor or whomever that they are in a historic district and do have certain guidelines. I think that the signage would help speak to that. We even had another comment this evening from a couple who explained what they were told by their realtor about building a detached garage. So the signage thing, I think, would help to not eliminate it, but it would really help to address those concerns that we have been. It's been an ongoing concern of this board.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that we can consider something like that. I think that was very good.
I agree, and I think the signs can also add some interest and character as well if they're done right, which I think would be a welcome
Yeah.
move. And you mentioned they're in the process of addressing the signage right now.
They're doing an inventory of signs that includes street signs and stop signs and all of that, but it also includes our wayfinding signs, signs at the fitness park and the dog park, and so it got to be quite a large undertaking. But we can certainly talk about historic signs as well. I
Seems
think
like
it'd be
this
kind
is
of
good
nice to
timing.
have.
Great.
Yeah, the neighborhood's identified in little, like the fruit bowl and the golden crescent and a little description of what that is.
Any other board comments?
I had, one's a question and one's a comment. Before I came onto this board, I received notice of an agenda item, actually was 53 West Tarpon. It was the office building that they wanted to put a ramp in front of. I guess it was your last meeting. It went on a couple months. But I noticed in those postcards, and I kept them, nowhere on the postcards does it have the address. And quite frankly, obviously it was in the notice area, I know the area, I wasn't sure what it was until I went onto the property appraiser's website to figure out, I counted, looked on the property appraiser, matched it up with the map to figure out which site this was. So I'm hoping that that was just an here, I'll pass one down so you can see it. I'm hoping that was just an aberration, and most of them do have an address, but if they don't, I just wanted to make sure that we were putting the address on the notice. So maybe that, I got three, you can keep that one. I got 3 notices because there were 3 different hearings for that site, and none of them had an address on it. So, and then the other thing is a question I read in the paper, I'm sure y'all have too, about a lot of major work being done or proposed to be done on Old City Hall. And did that Old City Hall restoration, renovation come to this board?
Oh.
Why would that have not come to this board?
The cultural center?
Yes, I'm sorry,
it
the
the-
Cultural
okay.
Center, the Old City Hall Cultural Center.
I don't know if it did. I'll have to check on that.
I did not remember seeing it.
Because it's been a long, and maybe it hasn't come yet. They haven't started anything. I don't know.
I
if
was just curious. I thought maybe I missed it, but I was just, and we all know public buildings plus private go through the board's review, and I kept seeing these articles about all the work being done, and I just didn't remember seeing it on the agenda. So I just wanted to ask that question.
I think it hasn't started yet. After the new budget year, I think they were waiting for. I know there was one meeting where somebody came up and talked about that it looked bad, and the response was, well, we've got money in the next budget to do it. So it's probably something that we'll be seeing coming up. Because I know this building came to HPB for the windows and everything.
So
So I'll check on that, but
Okay.
I don't think it's been started, but I'll let you know.
Thank you.
I have a couple comments. First, I'm going to welcome Ms. Terapany to the board.
Thank
Welcome
you.
back.
Thank
We're
you.
happy to have your expertise and knowledge on this board. Second, I just want to remind everybody that in January, we'll be electing a new chairman and vice chair, or chairwoman, or however we want to say it. So this is a great board to serve in that position because you're given everything you need, and it's a safe board to get your feet wet and serve in a leadership position. So be thinking about that when you get nominated. I have a question about this being the correct venue for public comments, to bring up violations or to bring up, where should we be directing people? If somebody, they call me and think that they're going to report to me, 302 South Spring is doing this. I don't want to seem that I'm not, because I care, but I'm not the code enforcement. I have, other duties outside of this board, and I don't have that time. Where do they go to make that complaint? Where do they go? Where do we direct them?
Well, you can direct them to planning and zoning.
So just direct them to planning and zoning,
Right.
and
Tell them to contact planning and zoning department, and we can look at the
not code
address.
enforcement. So it would be planning and zoning.
Well, we can look at if it's in the historic district, if you're talking about any violation anywhere in the
Historic
city.
district, and so planning and zoning.
Yeah, you can have planning and zoning. We can check with the building department if they've got a permit, and, because again, like, given the comment that the one woman said, sometimes there's a checklist of things that can be approved by staff and approved by HPB, and depends if it's a contributing or non-contributing structure. So somebody might be repairing a roof, and it was with the same, non-contributing structure, and it was being done with the same materials, so we've said it's okay. But somebody else might not know that. If you see work being done without a permit, they should have a permit as well. That's the building department. But if it's in the historic district and you see windows or doors or things being done, just, have them call planning and zoning. We'll take a look at it.
And then the last question I have is the old DC's downtown. It was a bar that's being renovated nicely and the new windows put in. It looked like those are aluminum, and I thought that they were to be bronze, like the
They are.
draft house, and so they just color them later. Is that what happens? or
No, they're bronze.
are they?
Yeah.
And then I believe it's the same building owner, down towards not T-Flies anymore, but Johnny's Tap House. They boarded up the front of that so nobody could see what was going on, and then put in that same type of window system, but they moved the door from the center off to the side, and that project never came before us.
That was determined, okay, let me go back to your first thing. I thought you were talking about that building. You're talking about the old DCs.
The old DCs.
Yeah, those are not being bronzed.
Okay.
They decided not to do that because they weren't doing the zip and ship portion of the building. And those were aluminum.
Was
So-
the application that they were going to be bronzed?
No,
Okay.
they was just gonna replicate next door, but it wasn't,
Okay.
yeah, it was aluminum. If they had to replace both, they would have done the bronze. That's what they had indicated.
Are they gonna make that storefront windows and put in a floor or something, or?
They're gonna, I think it's in now. They're gonna remove that other, the former facade is gonna come down, and so it's all gonna be level. I've been working on it since March.
Yeah. So the other question is the building further down, where they put the wall up in front
Right.
and then built the windows and moved the door from the center to the side. None of that came before this board.
Yeah, that one had been looked at and was determined it didn't require HPB approval.
Why
Why
not?
would that one not
Why would-
require HPV?
Because it was being repaired, it was being done with with same materials.
No, it
I
was
have
a
to go.
solid concrete block wall.
Yeah,
uh,
it was a
with-
solid
except for the
wall in the
window.
front,
Except for the door.
and the door was in the middle.
Yeah.
And it had that awning that was, the vinyl had been missing off of it for
Yeah,
years.
the awning came off.
So they put a wall up so you couldn't see what was happening, and they took that door down. Then they offset the door and recessed the door.
Right, I'll take a look at it. I know
That's-
it was,
I don't. That's concerning if the staff feels that that particular project should not have come before the board. Because if all those other storefronts that changed their windows and did all that need to come, I think that may have been overreach, and we should probably revisit that.
okay, I'll take a look at it. I haven't been familiar with it, so I'll take a look at it and get back
Thanks.
to you.
And I remember
appreciate
that, I mean, that building was, it didn't really help the street very much, to put it nicely. And so the renovation had an opportunity to obviously be a product of today, but still contribute to the historic character. And I don't think what they did does it at all.
Did they
Especially,
take the wall down? Can we see yet?
It did, I saw it today
Did
on
you?
the way
Okay.
home. Yeah, and it's, could have been lots better, let's just say.
If you don't mind checking that
Yeah,
out.
I'll check on that one.
Any other board comments?
Give me the new DC.
Karen, thank you again for all your hard work and your diligence. We really appreciate you. And with that, adjourn. Thank you.
What's on the board?
Thank you so much. I signed, you don't, or do I need to sign these two? What is this? I already signed it. Thanks so much.
So I got off and That's Kim.
Husband, city councilman, said he'd never do it again.
Yes, thank you.
I'm gonna keep this one. Not this.
Oh, right.
I'll let you
I
have this
signed.
one.
I remembered. I know.
Thank
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to serving together.
Yep, it'll be fun.
I gotta take that long walk home. Oh, so.